Hey, everybody. Hello. So today I wanted to talk about the death or murder, we believe, of, I think his name's Brian Thompson, who was the CEO of the healthcare insurance company in America, Uniting Healthcare, and his alleged assassin. Now, of course, we do not know at this stage whether the person that's accused is actually guilty. I don't want to name his name of the person who's a suspect. Yes, there was video footage that appeared to show him being shot. And look, it looks like he's guilty. There's a manifesto, it looks like he's guilty. But at the same time, because the trial hasn't happened, he hasn't pled guilty. Um, in the interest of justice, you have to say we don't know yet, and I'm choosing not to mention that guy's name. I'll mention the victim. There's no, that's not damaging the court case. So I wanted to go over that because there's been something that perhaps a little bit unsettling, where in certain quarters, people have been praising the assassin and saying, well, he got rid of a greedy person, an evil person. So I wanted to just go over that. Now, the first thing I want to say is that when we talk about public figures and people that we do not know personally, we cannot know if they're good or evil. Now, we can say based on what we know of them, they seem to be good or evil, but we don't actually know. I mean, if it's my mother, I'd know. If it's my father, I'd know. If my brother, my sister, my best friend or someone I'm intimately involved with, I'd probably know. But even then, maybe not. But how can we possibly know someone we've never met? We couldn't know, and we couldn't possibly know if they're good or evil. And we also know that most people have a bit of good and a bit of evil. Now, with most people, it's the majority good, but some people, there's a bit of evil in them. And just because they do a little bit of evil doesn't mean they're completely evil. It's quite rare to find someone that's completely evil. It's even quite rare to find someone that's mostly evil. Now, you do get that in some organised crime, but even in organised crime, there's a lot of people that are still got quite a lot of good in them, and they're doing very evil things overall. So, so we've got to bear that in mind. And also, I think that it's quite dangerous in a society for us to have people decide who are not going through the proper channels and deciding that somebody is guilty and deserves to die. So if this was a judge, fair enough. If this was a king or the president, or there's a normal structure, you could sort of say, well, okay, we can accept that that's probably going to be right, but even then they get it wrong. So I think this is quite dangerous, and I know I probably shouldn't look too much at fiction, particularly when it's a fiction that's adapted to something else. But there was a scene in the first Joker movie, so the one starring Joaquin Phoenix, and towards the end there, he's celebrated for having assassinated somebody who was believed to be evil, a TV show host in that case. And it reminds me of this because the Joker, even though the Joker movie was sort of made him into a bit of an anti-hero, but the Joker's one of the big villains. And so if we're celebrating someone like that, are we becoming like his accomplices, his because all the Joker's little assistants, they were all evil and they were manipulated and quite bad. So I know it's fiction and we don't want to draw too much onto that, but it is worrying for me to hear that sort of thing. And so I wanted to just go down. I'm obviously in Australia, I'm not in America. It's sometimes a bit difficult for me to understand how Americans could be in this situation. So I'll just start by saying what the situation is here. So here in Australia, we have public health and private health. So public health is very basic. Now, you don't get very good quality care. Now, it's still, in most cases, it's good enough. So, for example, let's say that you're dying, you've had some terrible accident, you need to go to the emergency. They will give you enough care to make sure you don't die. Now, and they really go, they bend over backwards for that. In fact, in any situation, whether it's an emergency or not, if you're going to die without good quality care, they'll give you the best quality care you need in order to not die. And so that's when you get there's very little difference between that and the private version. So the private version, when you're about to die, it might be you get a slightly better, bigger room, you get better doctors, but you'll get seen really well, public or private, for that sort of situation. So where it really matters, the difference is when you get like something that's not essential. So, for example, and I'll just say me. So, I have damage to my throat here. It's not life-threatening, and in fact, it's considered to be completely elective. It's not like I can't even go on a waiting list. So I have to wait until it becomes life-threatening, and then I'll be seen. And privately, I could be seen pretty much straight away, and it's about $2,000 out of pocket for the surgery I need. But without private health insurance, and there's no point going on it now, it's 28,000. So for a situation like that, which is pretty awful because I cough all the time because of that, um, and it makes it difficult to breathe and all sorts of things, and makes me vulnerable and various other things. A situation like that, private health is really useful. So, but you have to get it before the situation comes. And there's all sorts of situations like that where it'd be nice to get the surgery, but if you don't, bad luck. And even things like a colonoscopy, you can get it done for free in a public service and then you wait 3 years and they do quite a decent job. I got it done once privately and I think it was like $7,000 and it was amazing. It was wonderful. It was just luxury. And the difference in quality is quite large between certain types of things. Now, you go to a GP, GPs are technically all private, but they do bulk bill, which means you get it for free. Otherwise, you pay $90, $100 for a basic visit. Now, I don't know what the basic visit is when you go to America. I've only been to USA once and I went to Hawaii, which say that's a state of America. I mean, that's sort of its own country, but anyway. It's sort of autonomous, but it's still a state. Anyway, and in both cases, I had medical insurance. I'd paid $1,000 for the medical insurance to cover me. And when I went to USA main part, I went to Disney World and in so Florida, I needed some dental surgery. Now that was covered by my medical insurance, and they got rid of. I think I'd had a bit of chicken bone got stuck into my gum, and it was covered. Now, when I went to Hawaii, I had, well, I thought it was COVID, but it was some inhalation from the smoke from the volcanoes, it turned out. Now, they said it was going to be $500 out of pocket that I wouldn't get back, in spite of having my insurance. Now, if I compare those two in Australia to an Australian citizen, in both cases, they would be free. In both cases, you wouldn't need insurance. They'd be free. Um, and this is the thing. So, if you're an American tourist and you came to Australia and you didn't have the travel insurance, you would have to pay about $90 for each. Not 500, 90. And I had insurance and they were still trying to charge me 500 on top of that for a GP. But if you had insurance for both of them as Americans, it would be free. So yeah, I mean, if I was getting dental work, that's not covered public, so I'd have to pay for that myself as an Australian citizen. But GP's free. So this is the thing that Americans are charged a lot more than we are. So our private amount without insurance is a lot cheaper than their private amount without insurance. On top of that, and I don't know how common it is for them to refuse to let us use insurance to cover it. I think it's completely absurd. That was insane. I refused to go. I didn't go. I was like, well, you guys don't care about COVID. I got COVID. I'll just go on. Because here in Australia, when this was in 2023, so here in Australia, we would be giving you free. We'd be insisting on giving you free COVID tests. There, they were like, "Do you want a COVID test? It's $100. You're going to come here, boy." Yeah, and I mean, it was smoke inhalation. It was an active volcano that was spewing ash everywhere. So it's felt like it was COVID, but it wasn't. But the thing is that it was really negligent. That and then they let me travel with I was coughing. It could have been COVID. I could have been giving it to everybody on the plane, but they didn't care. So they put money ahead of health concerns. But obviously it wasn't. I didn't have COVID. I just had smoke inhalation, as I found out when I went to the other island, and there was no volcanoes, and I was fine. Went away in about a day. But yeah, it was. It's it's quite a lot different when you look at that. And yes, we do have medical insurance here. Um, For private health, we have people buy private health insurance. And again, like if they had something like my throat situation, you could be paying $500 a year for private health insurance, and then you get that for 2,000 instead of 28,000, and you'll be seen, and it's fine. And so that's what you get the insurance for. Now, generally speaking, most people who have private health insurance here in Australia are rich. Now, that's not always the case. There are some people that work it out and they're not that rich and they get it. And there are some people that are rich and don't get it because they're like, well, public health is fine. But you have that choice. Now, in America, there is no public system. Now, yes, they do have situations, and I've heard a bit about it, and I don't know that all the precise details, but I know that in certain circumstances they will waive their fees and they will see people anyway. So the thing is, Australia is nowhere near as rich as USA in terms of average wealth, in terms of overall wealth. We don't have their kind of income. We have a lot less wealth to spread around, um, and yet we manage to have public health. Now, there's other countries that have public health, and there are other countries that don't. Now, most of the countries in the world that don't have public health are poor countries that can't afford it. But even then, some of the poorer countries have it. So, this situation, if that had happened in Australia, first of all, you wouldn't be having private health insurance companies refuse because, well, not unreasonably, they'd be refusing for my situation. So if I went on there and I went on a private health insurance and I paid 500 a year, and then I said, "Hey, guess what? I've got this throat issue that I've had for 12 years," they would be denying it, and they'd have every right to deny it. And I'm making a YouTube video, oh dear, but no, they have every right to deny that. So that'd be a legitimate denial. Now, if they ever did one that was illegitimate and they refused one that I'd have every right to get, I could sue them and I could take them to court and I'd probably win. And the thing is that most people that go on to private health in Australia are fairly rich, they're fairly educated, and they know about the law and they can afford to hire lawyers. So what that means is that if they deny one that they shouldn't be denying, they'll get sued and they'll lose. So you wouldn't have this situation of having a medical insurance person who was denying claims because they just wouldn't. And if they did, they'd get fired. They'd lose their job. They would never work again because why are you denying legitimate claims? Maybe you could do it once or twice, but the level that this guy allegedly has denied or had denied claims is just so huge, it would just never happen. So, I mean, if I was an American citizen, me having to pay $500 for a GP visit, $500 for a GP. What the hell are you talking about? When I was under insurance and denying my insurance, and it wasn't the insurance company denying. If I was if I was an Australian citizen, that happened in Australia, I would sue the shit out of them and I would win. I would win big time because that is completely absurd. And the only reason they got away with that is because I was a tourist. Even in America, I would have sued them for that, and I would almost certainly have won. Um, again, I don't know the intricacies of the American law, but I'd be shocked if I'd lose that case because they had no right to do that. But of course, they took advantage of the fact that I'm a tourist. I was only there for a couple of weeks, and I didn't have time to sue them. And suing from overseas is too difficult for that sort of situation. But this is the thing. So we would never get that situation that they had with Brian Thompson, with the CEO of United Healthcare, would never get a situation where someone's repeatedly denying claims. Because if they repeatedly denied claims, they would be sued over millions of dollars, if not billions. They probably wouldn't go to jail because it's a civil case, but potentially they could, depending on if somebody died from it or whatever. And you just wouldn't have it. You'd be fired. There's laws protecting you, and because we have that public health system, it just wouldn't happen. If somebody went and killed somebody because they denied one of their claims, no one would be praising it. Not in Australia. We would not be praising it. So our mentality here, looking at that, is why the hell are you killing that person? What's wrong with you? But we've got to understand the American perspective, which is different to ours. And the American perspective is you need insurance because there is no public health service. So I'd be worried about going to America where you don't have public health. I don't know. I don't even understand it because look at the same situation with education. We have public education and private education. So does America. America has public schools. If you have public and private schools, duh. Why can't you do the same thing with public and private health? Why can't you have a very basic public system that can be terrible? It's not. It shouldn't be the same quality as the private one. You should get what you paid for. If you want to pay, you want to get best quality stuff, you pay for it. But have that system. Don't rely on insurance, and have that system where if you urgently need care, you get it. If you don't urgently need it but just want it, then you've got to pay the money. And that should be the system. That's just an obvious thing. You want to make sure that people aren't dying because they got hit by a car or for something that's not their fault. You know, I mean, you should be paying for plastic surgery. You should be paying for, well, if it's beautify plastic surgery, maybe you shouldn't pay for when you're hit by a car and it's plastic surgery. We get that for free in Australia. If you're hit by a car and you need plastic surgery to fix yourself, that's free. But if you want to get a boob job or whatever, that's not free. You've got to pay for that. Not even sure if insurance covers that. It's quite expensive here to do that sort of thing. But anyway, we work it out whether it's something you really need or whether you don't really need. Things like IVF are quite expensive, but if you're getting it for medical reasons rather than just because you want a baby, then you know, particularly if you could have had a baby anyway, and there's different amounts that you pay, and sometimes it's free. So there's all those sorts of situations. So anyway, given the American perspective, is it right? Well, I'd argue that the American perspective should be changed. They shouldn't. Yes, you can still have private health, but they should have public health as well. And I think it's really important to have both. Have the option. Don't get rid of private health, but have public health as well. And the doctors should be paid similar amounts whether they're working public or private. The taxes should pay for public, and if you want the best possible care, you pay private. You pay for what you get. Same with education. Same with all these other things. Um, you know, and that should be the thing. If you can't afford good quality private education, you go to a public school. Similarly, if you can't afford good quality private health, you should get the public health. Put Go on a 5-year waiting list for something and just put up with whatever you get, which is not always very good, but at least you got something. And that's the thing. If you've got a bit of spare money, well, you get a better quality private thing. I mean, I got a colonoscopy. I had a bit of extra money. Probably wasn't worth it, but you've tried that. It's like you got your economy airfare, and then you got your first class. You got a bit of spare money. You get a first class once. You have a little treat. But of course, you got lots of money. You'll get it every day, all the time. But was it this guy's fault as well? This is another issue. I mean, if you're in a situation, and this is the thing, Americans, I'm sure if they watch this video, and nobody much watches my videos, but if they did, I'm sure that they would be like, "Oh, America's great because we have private health, because we don't pay our taxes and give it to public health." In Australia, pay huge taxes. We like 40% and stuff. Americans are paying like 20. I mean, they're paying a lot less taxes than we are. And plus, they have a much bigger military expenditure than we do. We pay almost nothing in military. They have huge military. So they're spending all their money on military. They don't have enough money for paying for health. And a lot of people will say, well, that's fair enough. And so if that's fair enough, this is what happens. You get health claims tonight. Don't complain. If you're saying it's fair enough to have private health, don't complain that this guy's doing this. If you're saying that it's not okay to have private health, that you should have public health as well, well, you should be voting for that. You should be pressuring your members of parliament, your president, all these people, and not be just pulling a trigger. So, I mean, I guess we got a conversation out of it. Is this guy a hero? No, I don't think so. And I mean, the other thing is like the CEO guy. Yeah, I mean, yes, he's got all these millions and all that, but he's doing it because people want him to do it. He didn't do it by himself. There's all sorts of other people down the line that wanted him to behave like that, that wanted this, that wanted the denial, that wanted this, blah, blah, blah. So it's not just one person. And I think it's unfair to blame one person for the whole situation. It'd be the company, it'd be the whole system, the way that USA works for how they deal with private health. Um, and obviously, there's a difference between suing somebody for doing the wrong thing and murdering somebody for what you think is the wrong thing. I mean, yeah, I mean, it's a bit extreme. Um, but yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, this guy's obviously good looking, 25 years old, and seems to be quite smart. I'd be interested in hearing the court case. I mean, obviously, we don't know if he did it yet. Um, I think it'd be most interesting if he confesses and then says why he did it. And I think that that would be something that would be interesting. Um, if he denies it, then I suppose it'd be interesting to find out maybe somebody else did it, or you know, there's that whole thing where his eyebrows they're almost joined together, and then they're way out there, like mine are not up joined together. See, there's a big gap. So the guy with the mask on had a big gap, but then when he took the mask off, I mean, did he shave that bit? And did it grow back? Eyebrows take a while to grow back. I think that's relevant in saying there's a good chance this guy didn't do it. But I mean, who knows? Maybe he did do it. I think we've got to establish that before we get on to the rest of it. I know we get trial by media and we like to say if someone's guilty or not guilty, but I think we've got to get through that stage first. But whoever did it, is the fact that he's the CEO, does that guarantee that that's the reason? I mean, it might be, but I think we're a little bit jumping the gun here. And even if that is the case, I mean, it could have been, oh, this is a mugging, it could have been a random killing, it could have been all sorts of things. I mean, you know, just because you're a bad person and you've done whatever doesn't mean that that's the reason that someone's using to kill you. Could be a completely different reason. Could be that reason. We don't know yet. Yeah, and I think people need to be cautious about praising a murderer. I mean, it's very different between that sort of thing and like a revolution sort of situation where, you praise somebody like a Che Guevara or whoever, or if you want to praise the Syrian rebels, and they would have killed people because then that's a movement, and there's a lot more to that than just one assassin by himself. It, yeah, I mean, do we praise killing, or would we rather have had that guy brought to justice and all that sort of stuff? And I think if he is as bad as it seems he is, he should have been brought to justice. But yeah, it's perhaps not the easiest situation. I might be simplifying a bit, but I think the one good thing is that it does get that conversation. It gets a lot of Americans who are perhaps praising how good America is to realise that perhaps the bit where they don't have public health or don't have a viable public health system is a problem, and insurance is not the solution. It might be, it's better to have insurance than not to have insurance, but it's better to have public health. We do not need insurance if you have public health. Public health just covers it. And I think at least for, you know, things that you would die otherwise, you do need to have public health. You shouldn't have a $10,000 bill or any bill at all when you would have died otherwise. That should be covered. And we should be just saying, all right, we're prepared to pay our tax to deal with something that's not your fault that you would have died otherwise. Now, if it's your fault, that's a different issue. It's your fault and you nearly died, you probably should pay for it. That's a bit logical. Have some rules about it. But if it's not your fault, if you're hit by a car, not your fault, maybe that other person should pay, but you shouldn't be paying. You shouldn't be paying when it's not your fault. You're hurt. The hurting is bad enough. You recover. That should be the deal. And I think that they have themselves around the wrong way a bit with that. So, I'd like to see a situation where Americans do have a fairer health system. I could also talk about the minimum wage and tipping. They need to get rid of tipping. And they need to have a living minimum wage. Don't know what that would be. Here in Australia, it's about $22 an hour. I know conversion's a bit funny. So it should be something like 14, 15 in America. Now, whatever the amount it is, they need to get rid of tipping. Tipping needs to disappear. Bye bye, bye bye. Tipping is corrupt. They need to get rid of tipping. Their election system is pretty terrible too. But let's focus on one thing at a time. This one started conversation. maybe we'll end up with, and let's not call it Obamacare or Trump care or Biden care. Let's just call it something neutral, something like Medicare or something. Ours is called Medicare. Just call it something like that. Something that doesn't have a political spin on it. And I think that was the worst thing that Obama did with it, was put his name to it. You need to make it a bit more neutral than that because it shouldn't just be your political party. It shouldn't just be you. It should be no matter what. Anyway, that's it from me. Bye bye now.